Hi and welcome to this week's episode of Land Rovers Live. Coming up in today's show, we've got a Welding Masterclass workshop. Later on, we've got the review of the G4 roof rack. Then we'll be launching the Land Rovers Live Owners Club. But first, let's jump into some news. Since the last episode of Land Rovers Live, a few interesting things have been happening. The Bowler Defender Challenge is going right down to the wire next month in its final stages in Dumfries. Ed Cobley crashed out of the last rally in Wales, but he did finish. So now there's a title decider between Race to Recovery and Ed Cobley. We'll put the details on the screen for that. If you haven't been up to see the Bowler Rally, it's really, really good. And then, about 20 miles away from here, as we speak, the Queen is opening the new Jaguar Land Rover engine plant. This plant is due to go into production next year to produce the new Ingenium engines, which we'll see in the Discovery Sport and some other vehicles, I'm sure, including the Jaguar XF and XE. We haven't seen any photos because it's going on right now, but we'll put some up on the screen and a link to some bump about that. So that's pretty interesting. And in the last episode, when we went down and hosted our show from the West Midlands 4x4 meetup, they invited us out to one of their last weekends of the year away to Baer. We went along and had a really good time. I took the whole family down and we did some green laning, there was a bonfire and all sorts of bits and pieces. There are tons of photos online. I'll put a link on the screen for the blog post about that. Well worth checking out, and if you're a Midlands-based person at all, we really recommend checking out the West Midlands 4x4 team. And that's pretty well it for the news this week. Now here at Land Rovers Live, we're constantly looking for different ways to meet people. So we've been around all the shows. The show season is closed now, so we go along to the club meets and meet people there. But what we're always quite struck by is the different reasons and different types of vehicles that people own throughout the Land Rover scene. So we're starting up the Land Rovers Live Owners Club, and we're looking out for your vehicles where if you've got a particularly special story behind it, or you've been a 5th generation Land Rover owner, we'd love to hear from you. We're going to pick out the best ones, come and visit you and do a full spotlight on your vehicle, and you as well. We're kicking off that with this, our very first member of the Land Rovers Live Owners Club, and let's roll VT.
This one is a serious rig. 2.25 petrol with leaf springs. It's a restoration project that I think it will be finished next year. Weather permitting. It needs some welding on the chassis. I'm quite busy with work. I'll have to do it when I'm not busy. You know what they arrived like. She put in my bowls. I own this one for 30 years. It's been a good runner. This one is a TDI 100 with boost alloys. It's very fast and bumpy. Bump, bump. Someone's pinched the bonnet. So I need to buy a new one. My favourite one is my daddy's, which is Series 1329. And it's brown. My favourite thing is make them drive when we go bumpy. I got these trucks for playing. That's all. My next truck will be yellow. You can't go in it. They'll go away. I got some playing to do.
And there you have it. There's the first member of our Land Rovers Live Owners Club. If you've got an interesting story or you'd like to be featured on the Land Rovers Live Owners Club, do let us know. We'll put the links on the screen for that. You can also contact us on our email address, which is landroverslive@nexi.tv. We'd love to hear from you. Now we're going to move on to our workshop for this week. As always, brought to you in association with Baer. We took a look at welding this week. Why we do it? Well, for a Land Rover owner, we'll all have to do it at some point. Let's head on over and have a look. If you own a chassis-based Land Rover, then at some point you'll be facing rust. Left to its own devices, this quickly becomes rot and repairs will be required to keep it on the road. That means you'll either need to know how to weld or how to inspect welds. In this episode's workshop powered by Baer, we'll show you how to do just that in our welding masterclass. All Land Rovers are prone to rusting, and so are most cars, purely down to the fact that they contain steel. It can come as a bit of a shock when you're happily getting on with your business only to find a hole has appeared in your beloved vehicle. Whilst it can look scary, the fix is generally not painful. We found a small hole on the chassis of this Defender, and after chipping away with the hammer, it's revealed a section of rot that's about 7 inches long. This has to come out and be repaired. Grinding and welding can be dangerous work, so safety kit is key. Never grind without goggles. I have the x-rays to show why this is a very bad idea. When I was a lad, I was always told to wear gloves whilst grinding, but I found that to be quite dangerous. It's far more difficult to know when your hand is slipping down the grinder, even with a guard, and difficult to turn the grinder off if needed in a hurry. So I opt for no gloves. Also, leave your favourite shell suit in the wardrobe. I know it's tempting, but trust me, you'll be up in flames before you know it. Grinding out the rotted section of your vehicle is simple enough. 1 or 2 cutting discs will usually do the job. Another safety tip here is to grind in the direction away from where the disc wants to take you. It won't snag or break your disc that way, or injure you on the way. We can see here what the section of the chassis should look like if all was well. Here's what we've ground out of our chassis, showing it's poorly, and here's the plate that we're going to use to fix it. Later, we'll also show you what can be done with welding to make a repair that's worthy of a full-time restoration vehicle. There are a few different types of welding, the main ones being MIG, TIG and arc welding. Now, though the technique may be different for each of these, the principle is the same, but we're using electricity to arc and melt the two metals. That way we can melt them together. With arc and MIG welding, we also introduce extra metal of the same type to maintain the thickness and strength of the two surfaces being welded together. In short, we're aiming to make two metals into one with all the strength of the original. Simple enough, but you'd be surprised how often you see terrible welding. I'm no artist, and as such there may be a comment or two below about who can weld neater, etc., but what I'm going to achieve here is a strong weld with good penetration. Before any welding commences, we need to prep. Like painting, welding is only ever as good as the prep that you put in. Cleaning rust off any surfaces is key here. Rust does not conduct and makes for crappy welds. Here we recommend the use of linishing discs, not grinding wheels. That way we can't inadvertently remove all the bulk of the existing material. The result we're after is a clean surface to weld onto, not bigger holes in the chassis. So here we've got 2 welds that look okay on a couple of pieces of steel. The settings are exactly the same on the welder and the overall look is kind of the same. However, there is a big difference on one that is very easy to get complacent about. The first one, the steel is welded straight together, and the second one has chamfered edges. So let's test the strength. The first one comes apart quite easily with a twist. This is comparable to vibration in your vehicle over time. The chamfered edges will hold fast, and the metal around the weld is actually what gives here. This is a good weld, and we very nearly didn't tell. The reason for this is penetration. The weld has effectively welded far deeper into the steel versus the first weld. You can see the difference, but it is slight, so top tip. For strong welds, chamfer your edges. As with grinding, you'll need some safety gear for welding. We use leather gauntlets and a welding mask. Do not be tempted to cheap out here. Marigolds and sunglasses will take some explaining in A&E. Just to be clear, it's not the heat or even the weld spatter that we're worried about here, even though both are quite uncomfortable. Welding, due to the UV light, will give you a suntan very quickly and can burn your skin within minutes. And even worse is arc eye. If you've not had this, I don't recommend you try and get it. The feeling is of somebody shoveling sand into your eyes constantly for a very long time. By looking at the flash of a welding gun, the surface of your eyes melt and it's incredibly unpleasant, so you have been warned. On this welder, the wire speed is set up automatically with the current. Different welders can be controlled differently, but if you're not sure, use a clean piece of steel to set it up and turn the power up just so it doesn't blast holes through the surface, and then the wire speed up so it doesn't melt back towards the tip of the welding gun. Here we start by tacking the corners. The heat generated during welding will quickly warp plates and you'll end up with a headache if you don't. Whilst welding, we're going to point the welding gun in the direction that we want to weld. This way we're always heating up the bits that we want to weld, not the bits that we've already welded, and pointing the gun straight down can start to blast holes. Once we've welded the whole way round, let's visually check for bits that we've missed or anywhere where the water can get in. We want this to be a watertight seal. And then lastly, give it a good whack with a hammer. No good welding will ever be damaged by this, and poor welds should be exposed, so if it cracks, go over it again. Now that's not the prettiest of patch-up jobs, but it is a good solid job that will extend the life of your vehicle and protect it against further rot. But if you do have the extra bit of time and want to do a restoration quality job that nobody will ever know you were ever there. For the same issue here, we've made 2 plates that fit inside the cutaway section of the chassis. The hardest part here is the time taking to grind and create 2 pieces that fit perfectly into the gap. You can see here that the original construction of this chassis has a welded lip, and we want to recreate that as well. Once we've lined up the new pieces, the process is the same as before. We've chamfered our edges for good penetration and we're ready to weld. And this time, once we're happy that our welds are solid and complete, we'll use a linishing disc, again just to level the surface down. And voila, a lick of paint, and this repair looks as good as when it rolled off the line. Just a couple more tips to finish. If you need to weld a fuel tank, we strongly recommend you take it to a specialist. Welding an empty fuel tank is like welding a bomb. Also, if you weld near brake lines, cables, fuel lines, then do take time to protect these beforehand, or move them first. And there you go. That's what we think you need to know about welding. There are different types of welding, and in future episodes we'll take a look at those. Now you can use our videos as standalone videos or in partnership with some of our previous videos. But also there are other great people doing some good work out there as well. The Land Rover Toolbox videos by trail fitter Chris Higgins. We'll put a link on the screen for him as well. They're a really great resource for workshop guides. There is also Fun Rover Ben Gribbin, who does his bits and pieces. He promises to be churning out more videos, so we'll put a link on the screen for him as well. We're not here to just generate fans for ourselves. We think the whole point of what we do is to become a resource for you guys, and there are other people out there who do a good job as well, so we'll always mention them. If you think we've missed any, do let us know. It's worth mentioning as well, actually, what I've got into fairly recently is the Centre Steer podcast. That's audio only, and they're about an hour long, but they're pretty solid listening coming from North America.
The Land Rover G4 roof rack from Baer is not a new product, but it has become the control that we test all other roof racks against. This one has been in use on our Defender since the start of summer, where it's been used and abused pretty well non-stop since then. When it arrives, the G4 roof rack is fully assembled. In fact, it's welded the whole way round. So, it's ready to go straight on your vehicle. It's a pain for the carrier, but a joy to know you'll still have your weekend free. As you'd expect from a rack at this price, build quality is a given. Notably, the clamps that hold the rack in position are great. They are rubber coated and won't scratch your paintwork, and there's plenty of them so they have never rattled or moved around. The powder coating is very tough and despite best efforts haven't managed to scratch it off yet. The G4 is a luggage rack and not really suitable for roof tents without some extra bracketry. It's also designed for vehicles with a sunroof, so there is a section of it that doesn't have bars. There are 4 mounting points for spotlights on the front and plenty of strapping points around the edges. So the G4 rack on the whole is a great looking and very well made roof rack. But our favourite bit is the rear ladder. It comes in 2 parts and, as with many ladders, requires a bit of drilling to get it on. But the low profile and simple design makes the ladder very appealing visually, and its beefy construction means it will last as well as the rack itself. The G4 roof rack and ladder are available now from £900 via your local Baer distributor or by clicking on the links below.
As mentioned in that review there, the G4 roof rack is the one we mark all other roof racks by. Its build quality is really good. So it's about time we gave something away. Recently, 1948 Original Equipment have sent us a whole load of gear, and ordinarily when it's not too cold you can see I'm sporting it, and so is Jeremy and Amy and what have you. We've also got some spare bits and pieces that we'd like to give away to any of you guys. We've noticed a huge uptake on Twitter and Facebook of late. We'd like to carry that on. So the competition is very simple this week. We'd like you to just share this episode around anywhere and everywhere. Multiple entries will be taken, and then we'll put the names into a hat and draw those in next week's show. And that's pretty well it for this week's show. It is worth mentioning at this stage, if you're interested in writing maybe text blogs, or if you're a dab hand with video and would like to get involved in the show, do let us know. Or if you've got any other thoughts or feedback on the show, we'll put the links on the screen for there. There's also our web address, Land Rovers Live at our email address, landroverslive@nexi.tv. Do get in contact with us. We're always looking for good stories and contributors. That's pretty well it for this week's show, and we'll see you in a couple of weeks' time with more interesting news, reviews and bits and pieces from the Land Rover world.